As we enter into a new year, we recognize that we live in a world that is fractured and broken. Ukraine, Sudan, Gaza, Lebanon, anti-Semitism, racism, Islamophobia, attacks against gender identity, climate change, water and air pollution, the depletion of rainforests, ice caps, natural resources. It is an exhausting list, even as this list is far from exhaustive. So what's the solution? None of us know. But a methodology for coping with our brokenness is the secret to the Jewish people's survival. Our secret weapon is, Russell? Is not Russell. It might be. Russell, would you play that piece for us? Our secret weapon is tikva, hope. Tonight, the four of us will spend just a few minutes, each exploring a different facet of hope. We pray that together, our words help guide, preparing us to traverse the path this new year offers. As we navigate our way, may hope, may tikva, in its multitude of variations, lift our spirits and our efforts to bring healing to our world. Sorry.
I recently found this poem on my social media feed, and I've come back to it daily ever since. It is in response to Emily Dickinson's poem, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. The poem does contain some graphic imagery. My apologies in advance. Hope is not a bird, Emily, it's a sewer rat, by Caitlin Saida. Hope is not the thing with feathers that comes home to roost when you need it most. Hope is an ugly thing with teeth and claws and patchy fur that's seen some vile stuff. It's what thrives in the discards and survives in the ugliest parts of our world, able to find a way to go on when nothing else can even find a way in. It's the gritty, nasty little carrier of such diseases as optimism, persistence, perseverance, and joy, transmissible as it drags its tail across your path and bites you in the behind. Hope is not some delicate, beautiful bird, Emily. It's a lowly little sewer rat that snorts pesticides like they were lines of coke and still shows up on time to work the next day, looking no worse for wear. Indeed, we Jews know what it means to find a kernel of hope in the midst of despair. For more than a year now, our people have felt the bottom fall out from under us again and again. The grief and uncertainty weighs us down, squeezes us on all sides as if we were in a vice grip, and feels like a sucker punch to the gut. And yet, we keep moving forward together. We've sought out our people and have found glimpses of hope and comfort together with our fellow mourners. I have found great solace and hope in coming together as a community during this difficult year, coming together for Friday night services, witnessing our beautiful B'nai Mitzvah take to the Bima on Shabbat, or the exuberance of a bustling Sunday program tefillah. I hope these times in community have brought you some comfort too. Then there is the personal grief that each one of us sometimes finds ourselves falling into. Who among us hasn't had our own descent into utter despair when we find ourselves in our own personal Egypt? As many of you know, the Hebrew word for Egypt is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, where our ancestors were enslaved under Pharaoh's wrath. This Hebrew name for the place of our people's bondage can be broken up into two Hebrew words, Mitzar Yam. When said like this, it means from a narrow place or narrow straits. Many years ago, I found myself in a personal Mitzrayim. I was at a low point and felt squeezed on all sides and pretty distraught. A friend of mine, a rabbi friend of mine, invited me to try a short practice. She had me hold my hands over my heart and say lovingly to myself, "Oh, sweetheart, everyone at one time or another finds themselves in Mitzrayim, and you will get through this." I found this practice to be so powerful, and I return to it whenever I need. The beauty of it is that it begins with compassionate acknowledgement of the pain. There is something meaningful about taking a moment to sit with the sadness. Notice where you are. Aha, I'm in Mitzrayim, and I am not alone here. And then the glimmer of hope arises. I will get through this. It is the still small voice, the kol d'mama daka, that calls in a whisper through our despair. That is hope. That is how our people have persevered through hundreds of generations of joy and suffering. Through listening to that voice of hope, even when that hope feels more like a sewer rat than a delicate bird. In this new year of 5,785, I pray that we can hold each other through our despair and help each other to emerge from our collective Mitzrayim with open, albeit broken hearts. L'shana tova u'metuka. May you have a happy, healthy, and sweet new year.
Just over a month ago, as I watched the videos of Rachel Goldberg and John Polin eulogizing their son, Hirsch Goldberg Polin, the Israeli-American held captive by Hamas for 330 days, then murdered by his captors, I was struck by how, somehow in the midst of this most terrible, tragic grief, they each spoke of some kernel, some glimmer of hope. As John Polin said, for 330 days, Mom and I sought the proverbial stone that we could turn over to save you. Maybe, just maybe, your death is the stone, the fuel that would bring all the remaining 101 hostages home. Od lo avda tikvatenu. Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not yet lost. Hearing this line from Hatikva, Israel's national anthem, the hope, this line at this funeral, my breath caught in my throat. From the depths of this most tragic loss, in this most horrific of circumstances, I was in awe of how he could muster the ability to even mention the possibility of hope. Od lo avda tikvatenu hatikva bat shnot alpayim, lihiot am chofshi be'artzenu, be'eretz Tzion v'Yerushalayim. Our hope is not yet lost. The hope of 2,000 years to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. So much of that hope and that vision feels threatened right now. It is hard as we near the 1-year mark of those horrific attacks of October 7th to imagine a better, more peaceful future in Israel. After so much death and destruction, after a year of intractable fighting, it often feels like there is no end in sight. This war has been painful and gut-wrenching, and even now, we wait with bated breath to see how this latest round of escalations play out. We hold both heartache and hope for the 101 hostages still in Hamas captivity. But sadly, we Jews are no strangers to suffering. Even in our ancestors' darkest days, they refused to let go of a vision of a better world. Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, is such a beautiful balance of both acknowledging our struggles on the one hand and stubbornly holding on to hope. We are a stiff-necked people, after all. Hatikva began as a poem by Naftali Herz Imber, a Galician Jewish poet somewhere around 1878, then called Tikvatenu, our hope. In 1940s Europe, it became a song of defiance among Jews living through the horrors of the Holocaust. And in 1948, when Israel declared statehood, Hatikva became the de facto national anthem. There is no doubt that there is endless cause for worry and heartbreak in Israel right now. Every day, every minute seems to bring more news of increased tensions, more death, more destruction, more rockets and missiles raining into Israel, more innocent lives lost. An expanding front in the north, and now yesterday's attacks from Iran, it can all be too much to bear. And it can be hard in these moments to give ourselves permission to even consider hope. But we cannot let go of the possibility of peace somewhere out there on the horizon, to imagine what it might look like. Rabbi David Wolpe, who had served on Harvard's anti-Semitism advisory group before stepping down in protest in December, offers this reflection on what gives him hope in these difficult days. He explains, I imagine myself in a conversation with my great-great-grandfather, and I say to him, you know, there are anti-Semites causing problems for the Jews at Harvard. And he says to me, there are Jews at Harvard? And I say to him, yeah, but they hate Israel. And he says, there's an Israel? And I say, yeah, but you should hear the administration is talking about shaving some of the billions of dollars of aid. And he says, and America gives it billions of dollars of aid? And I say, you know what? You're right. We have problems. But great-great-grandparents, we are very, very blessed. My friends, as we mark the beginning of a new year tonight, let us not fall victim to despair. Instead, let us honor the hope that our ancestors have held on to from our very beginnings. Yes, we have problems. Our beloved Israel is hurting, and our people and too many innocents are suffering. And yet, we must hold on to the belief, the prayer, that better, more peaceful times will prevail someday. How dare we not hope?
Of the world right now, from escalating wars in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in Sudan, human rights violation, hunger and poverty raging the world, domestic violence. This past year has been filled with goodness and also despair. There is so much demand from us from all corners of the world to do something, to help in some way. Then how do we enter the new year? How do we go forward with hope, or even when we feel hopeless? Environmental activist Joanna Macy and co-author Dr. Chris Johnston, in their book, Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We Are In Without Going Crazy, they tell us that what we need in this time is no ordinary hope. What we need is active hope. Practical hope. They write, since active hope does not require optimism, we can apply it in places, in areas where we feel hopeless, rather than weighing our chances and proceeding only when we feel hopeful. We focus on intention and let it guide us. They then provide a spiral structure of 4 personal and communal practices that may help us renew hope. May I say active hope. First, coming from a place of gratitude. When we come from a place of gratitude, we move to active hope, the hope of action. From a place of love and appreciation of nature, gratitude for the gift of life, for love of our family. When we fill our lives with gratitude, we can act on behalf of the people and the things we love, especially when we feel that there is a danger of their destruction. Our daily liturgy has us start each day from a place of gratitude. Modéani, Eloheinu Shama, Nisimbe Koyom. We give thanks every day for simply being alive and being able to face a new day, whatever it may bring. When we stop and reflect on the things and people we are grateful for, we are moved to act to protect them. Next, honoring our pain. We must provide space and rituals for ourselves and each other to lament and to express our pain for the state of the world. This season, we name our failures, we name our fears as a whole community. When we do so, we don't feel alone, and we feel the embrace of all those standing with us. Third, seeing the world with new eyes. With this step, I am reminded of Rabbi Israel Salanter's teaching. He taught that as he was getting older, he realized that if he had changed himself, he could have made an impact on his family, and his family could have made an impact on their town, and their town could have made an impact on the nation, and his nation could have made an impact on the world. Rabbi Salanter's teaching and these days of remind us that through Teshuvah, we can retrace our steps. We must first understand our place in the world, what we can and what we can't change. We must also recognize that our contribution, however small it is eventually felt in the world. Our actions can be part of a larger chain of reaction. And finally, we go forth by doing our part. Our Talmud tells us that we are not obligated to finish the work, to complete the work of repairing the world, yet neither are we permitted to desist from it. So we go into the new year, we have to engage, even if it's taking the first step, that first action. Shana Tova.
When we decided to each speak about hope, I reversed it and asked myself, what am I most hopeless about? The answer came immediately: politics. In 39 days, we will elect national, state, and local leaders, including a new president. My sense of hopelessness is not based on who will be elected. Rather, it's about how we talk about politics. Ever since Spiro Agnew in 1970 castigated those who disagreed with President Nixon's policies, calling them nadering nabobs of negativism, we have spiraled ever downward as a society, increasingly willing to attack and condemn those with whom we disagree. The oral and written mud is flung in all directions, with those on all facets of our country's political spectrum having very dirty hands. As you might expect, I find my source of hope out of this morass of vitriol in our sacred tradition. I'd like to offer two tonight. Bereshit Rabbah, written around the 4th century CE, teaches us that, quote, if you desire the world to endure, there can be no absolute justice Unless you forget a little, the world cannot survive. From this midrash, we learn that truth and justice, while true and just, are too harsh to allow this world to endure. We require, as the text explains, some forgetting. The language of politics today is that of certitude and unwavering conviction of what each side would label truth and justice. However, as I'm sure many of us have experienced, our relationships cannot stand against such a withering approach. Jumping forward 1,500 years, consider a poem by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai. It is called "The Place Where We Are Right." From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. We know that we are right in many of our political conversations. It happens to me. While I do not say it, I do sometimes think, what is wrong with you? Don't you see it the way I do? Are you stupid or what? Amichai cautions us that such attitudes create a relationship landscape that is hard and trampled, a place where flowers will not grow. Rather, doubt and love permit the soil to be plowed, giving it the air and nutrients needed to thrive, a place where even a whisper can be heard. How might things change if we began our political conversations not from the place where we are right, but from our doubts and loves? One example. A friend of mine is the mayor of a small suburban Kansas town. We do not see eye to eye on almost every political issue. But this mayor is a dear friend and one for whom I have voted. Why? Because the mayor listens. The mayor asks questions. The mayor leads with love. And that gives me hope. We began our conversation with you tonight with Hatikva, Israel's national anthem. One phrase more than any other is, Rabbi Heath said, stands out for me as well, Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not yet lost. We guarantee that hope survives, that hope wins, by modeling how our tradition teaches us to engage in these difficult conversations. If we do, and if we elect officials who do as well, then, to paraphrase Bereshit Rabbah, our world will not just survive, it will thrive. And that gives me hope.
After following the news in Israel this week, you might think to yourself, how can our clergy even speak of hope when things are so terrible all around us? As one article in Haaretz espoused this week, all the honey in the world can't sweeten this Rosh Hashanah. But this is what we do as Jews. Even in our darkest, most difficult moments, we gather together, we celebrate our holy days, we reflect, we pray, we strive to learn and grow, and we find strength in our coming together. As I learned earlier this spring from a pair of Israeli and Palestinian speakers who are leaders of the Israeli-Palestinian group Omdim B'Yachad, standing together, One of the greatest tragedies in this moment is that no children in Israel, Jewish or Palestinian, can really envision or dream what a future might look like right now. What they called for, what they are trying to build, is a new narrative, an alternative story, one that recognizes that the safety of Jews is deeply interconnected with the well-being of Palestinians, and the safety of Palestinians is deeply interconnected with the well-being of Jews. A narrative that dares to imagine the possibility of peace. If we cannot begin to envision a world which is better than the one we currently see all around us, then we have nothing to work towards. But if we can take a breath, close our eyes, picture and imagine the world as it ought to be, a better, more peaceful world, then we can begin to get to work to start bringing it about. That is the work we Jews and our partners are called to in this moment and in this year ahead. Shana Tova Umetuka. May this be a better year, a sweeter year.